colleagues, friends of IB, as the chair of our IB Board of Governors, Helen Drennan, yesterday told, about 8 months ago, IB launched an initiative called Festival of Hope. The trigger for that initiative was really research and study evidence. And what kind of evidence? The University of Bath study of 10,000 young people aged 15 to 25 told us that 75% of those young people believed that the future is a scary place for them. Far too many of those young people also believed that the world will come to an end during their lifetime. Another study stated that of young people from 10 to 12 years, the majority is experiencing climate anxiety. And that kind of evidence goes on and on. The basic idea of Festival of Hope is very simple. It is to create safe spaces with strong student engagement to enable young people to come together, to share, to have a dialogue, to have a voice, to be heard, and to know to be heard. And the question today is the question that how can we make sure that those anxieties and fears that the evidence is telling us, we could turn that action or that anxiety into hope. And hope, in the Festival of Hope, it's a verb. It is a call for action. And actually, we have here today 4 young people who have shown with their work what it means to turn hope into action. So let's hear their story. Would you like first to tell each one of you a bit about yourself and why do you see it so important to engage young people? Thenu.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. Hello, everyone. It's such a pleasure to be with you all today. My name is Thenu, and I'm currently the CEO of the Oaktree Foundation. We're a completely youth-run international development organisation, and we focus on providing funding and support for youth-led initiatives in the Asia Pacific. So I've been really lucky over the last 2 years to work with a lot of young people across our region, and the words you've said this morning about hope, I think, is my number one takeaway as well. Yes, there is a lot of anxiety and fear, which we'll talk about in a second as well. But ultimately, there is energy, there is hope, and there is a will for young people to come together and create the change that we want to see. So that's what I'm really passionate about and really lucky to do in my everyday work.
Yeah, is that one? Yeah. I'm Char, I'm 15 years old, and I'm a student at Woodleigh School over in Melbourne. And I think it's really important to support and to empower young people because I am quite a young person and I feel directly a lot of the impact that empowerment and that sense of hope, you know, that feeling of, yes, we can hope, we have the ability to hope. I can feel directly the impact that has on my friends and I think that, yeah, that's why it's really important.
Kia ora, tēnā tātou katoa. Ko Ayla Blair-Smith tōku ingoa, heuri tēnei no Ngāti Apakura, Ngāti Maniapoto, tūwharetoa, ngai tahua no hoki. Hello everyone, my name is Ayla Blair-Smith and I have just introduced myself in Te Reo Māori, the native language of Aotearoa, New Zealand. I come from a multitude of areas around there, from the North Island and the South Island, and I think that hope is an extremely powerful thing that we need to grasp, but I think that it's very important to be here and to have young people's voices heard, because I think that at the end of the day, the education is for them and they need to see themselves reflected in the curriculum and in the education system.
Thank you. If we start then with you, you've been working a lot with sustainable development. What is the thing that you see that young people can bring in us kind of closer for reaching the sustainable development goals?
Such a great question. So I've been asked this question a lot, actually, and an example that I like to draw upon is, for example, when you look at in a company the stakeholders that you have for your work, you always want to have future stakeholders in the room, and so I think of it in a very similar way in relation to the SDGs. Young people are the custodians of the world. They're the leaders of today and going forward into the future, and they have very different ideas from previous generations on the way that we should live in this world and the way that we should look after this planet. So in terms of all the SDGs, it's really important, in my opinion, to get those young people in the room involved in actioning those goals, because they're the ones that are going to have to live with the outcomes.
Have you kind of seen somewhere where it's been done very well, the engagement of young people, of kind of those central questions of their future of sustainable development?
Absolutely. I see it every day in grassroots movements in particular. Obviously, there are great examples of governments and decision-making bodies involving young people in their own decision-making, but some of the best work around sustainable development that I've seen is actually when young people have crazy ideas and start it themselves. So, for example, over the last couple of years, my organisation has conducted a research project around the effects of COVID-19 on young people across the Asia Pacific, and we wrote it as a cooperative with hundreds of young people across the region. And what we see is that a lot of these people actually took initiative during the pandemic to contribute to things outside of, what was happening to them right now. They were looking at climate change, they were looking at health systems, systemic change in those health systems. They were looking at corruption in their government, and they were starting those initiatives themselves, which is really, really inspiring to see. But of course, a lot of young people around the region don't actually have the financial backing, the mentorship, the sponsorship, and the support to get these ideas off the ground. So I think what happens best is when they have organisations or an older generation supporting them in enacting that.
Thank you. Char, you have done a lot of work with creating really inclusive school community. Can you share with us that on that journey, what have been your kind of highs and lows, the moments of despair and the moments of success?
Okay, yeah, so working towards inclusive communities, that's quite a roller coaster a lot of the time, and as a non-binary young person, that makes it even bigger. We get these great moments of like absolute joy, but we also get these moments where we just feel a bit hopeless, right? So we'll start off with the good. So I am a member of the Student Equity Committee at my school, which is a group of students who work together to educate other students and the staff about different types of diversity and issues that are really important to us. We also work a lot on celebration of different diversities at our school. So this has looked a lot like celebrating Ida Hobbit, which is the International Day Against Homophobia, Transphobia and Biphobia. And these sorts of days are really bright and exciting, and everyone sort of comes together and supports all the minorities at our school, and it's just this really great opportunity, and it makes everyone feel a lot safer. We've also had a huge win recently with our equity committee. We've got toilets now. So at our school we now have gender neutral toilets, so trans and non-binary kids can pee safely, which very, very important. We also got some like lower points, right? Like, I've had a great experience at school. Every single one of my teachers has understood, or at least tried to understand, my identity, except this one time. This teacher basically didn't ever use my correct pronouns and referred to my friends and I as girls, despite the fact that I am clearly not a girl. He would also leave transgender and non-binary recognition out of his content, his teaching content, which happened to be the health and wellbeing curriculum, which was a bit ironic. And by the time I had sat down with him and we had a conversation and we sorted everything out, I kind of had a bit of an inkling of what school would be like if I didn't learn in any of my classes. Like, because he wasn't recognizing me, I lost interest in the class. I didn't put any effort into assessments. I basically stopped listening some of the time because I just didn't feel like I was there. And I realized that if this was in all of my classes, I would want to drop out of school. And that's something that's really awful, right? Because 12% of young people, in Australia at least, are queer. And so if you've got 12% of your students wanting to drop out of school, that's a huge amount, right? So we need to make sure that we are emphasizing those highs, we are making sure that we are celebrating different identities, that we are making sure that people can pee safely, that people are hearing themselves in education, that they're hearing about themselves in the health and well-being area, they're making sure that they feel like they are being heard.
Yeah. Thank you so much. I think you just I think you just exemplified through the words that Professor Helen Street told us yesterday about the importance of the autonomy and the connection. So thank you very much for that. Ayla, you have experience with education of having gone both to an indigenous education and then to the United World College type of an education. Could you share that experience, how do they differ and where do you see the strengths of each of those different types of education?
Yeah, absolutely, thank you. So I grew up in Aotearoa, as I was saying before, and I had the extreme fortunate experience to go through Kohanga Reo, which is a fully immersed kindergarten, I guess, and then through Kura Kaupapa Māori, which is, again, another full immersion school, aged from 5 to 18. So all of my education was conducted in my native tongue. And then at the age of 17, I was fortunate enough to go to UWC Robert Bosch in Germany and study the IB. So I feel very rounded now in my experience of an Indigenous education and an extremely Western education. And it's not to say that I think that one is better than the other whatsoever. I just think that they can both complement each other if we allow them to and we give them space to. And so within my education in Aotearoa, it's an extremely community-led and focused education system. And so it's not just the child that is important in that, it is also their family. It is also understanding that the environment in which they go home to is just as important as the environment in which they are nurtured and educated in. And that community base was something that, despite the fact I think that it exists within a UWC school, I don't think that it is always present in a Western education system. I think that there are different things that we are focused on, and it is a much more individual experience, and individual experience of success as well. It is about your grades and how you do and how you perform. And there are pros to that as well, but I think being able to have both has allowed me to walk between both worlds. In New Zealand, Māori people are present within society, and we are currently raising our voice in every way possible and in every stream possible that we can. And so I think that the fact that I was fortunate enough to experience both has really allowed me to shift between the two worlds, but also to become even more strong about my Māori identity and how important it is for young Māori students and Indigenous students to see themselves reflected in every way possible in our education system. So I think that's how the two exist.
I've understood that you're also advising the ministry in New Zealand that there's a lot of discussion about the decolonizing the curriculum. Are there certain things that you would like to point out that you would see in that sense to be changed in the very traditional curriculum?
Yeah, I think that's a very big role that we are currently looking towards in New Zealand, is how can we decolonize the education system? And not just in New Zealand, I think it's becoming more and more a discussion outside of New Zealand as well, and hopefully here in Australia as well with the Aboriginal community. And I think it's a really, really big question, but I think first and foremost we have to understand that the education that is extremely popularized at the moment is a Western education system. And I think we need to understand that that education system is extremely informed by a colonial perspective. And I think that once we all really understand the roots of that, and again, looking at the grassroots, as you mentioned, and how important that is, once we all understand that, I think then we need to also reevaluate and talk about how we can work together with each other. And I think that's the most important thing, and I think that's where a lot of my hope comes from. It comes from Māori working alongside Pākehā and Pākehā working alongside Māori. It's that collaboration and participation that will get us through decolonizing these things. And I think that's where it starts. And I don't think that we're fully there yet, but I think if we can start there and we can really establish ourselves well, then we can move on to bigger and better things.
Mm-hmm. Yes, thank you. Char, you have also maybe been educating your peers that what diversity and inclusion means, and of course then the larger community connected to school also. Are there things that you would like to see that would be kind of the default mode in the future for the next generations?
Yeah, so I'd love to be able to introduce myself and then not have to explain how I've introduced myself. Like, I'd like to be able to come up to anyone in this room and say, "Hi, my name is Char, my pronouns are they, them," and not explain what pronouns are. I'd also love for that, even if I did have to explain what my pronouns were, I'd love for the other person to just go, "Okay, cool, I maybe don't understand that, but I acknowledge it." And I think the way we get to get to this place, is to start really emphasizing open-mindedness in our education. So not just by teachers being open-minded of students' identities and diversities and learning preferences, but we need to start teaching students how to see things from different perspectives. Because we live in an age of hyperpolarization, where everyone builds their little echo chambers out of their social media and the people they surround themselves with. They basically get their little army of yes men from all around the world. And I think we need to teach young people especially how to break out of that echo chamber, or at least how to listen to things outside of that echo chamber. And it's really great because at school, right, you are forced to learn content that you may not like, or you have to write essays on topics that disagree with your beliefs, or you have to debate a topic, debate a side that you don't agree with. And I think this is really, really important, and this is something we're losing as we move into the age of, oh, everyone has their own truth and everyone can believe just whatever they want and doesn't have to listen to anyone else. Because we do need to listen to other people. We do need to be able to hear each other, because when we get to that place where we are so passionate about ourselves and what we believe that we can't even talk to the other people, we actually get violence, and we've seen this all across the globe. People are so separated from each other and so locked into their little rooms that they can't, they would rather hurt the other person than even hear their beliefs. And that is what I want to see to get us to a more equitable future. I want to see a world where we don't have this issue, where we are teaching students how to hear each other, teaching students how to understand an argument that goes against them, even if it does, it goes against them. It's teaching students how to hear things differently, because then we don't end up in a situation where we have huge angry mobs attacking each other because they can't even listen to each other.
Thank you. Thenu, let's next go with you. We have an auditorium full of talented educators. What is the message you would like to tell them when we're talking about empowering young people?
Such a big question. I'll try to keep it brief. I would love to just quickly touch on the point about decolonisation. This is something that we're really trying to do in all of our programs, and it's quite a personal one for me as well. I actually went to a school right here in Adelaide, and I absolutely loved it, but I have just recently realised that I did have to hide a lot of my own cultural identity in an attempt to fit in to what is largely a really colonial school structure across Australia. And there was a recent report published by the Diversity Council of Australia identifying that culturally and racially marginalised women in particular do this thing called code switching, where they really try to act more Anglo-Saxon in order to try and fit into their environment. And this is something that I experience at school, a lot of my friends experience at school, and I would love to see teachers exploring different ways to allow different cultures to thrive in their environment. And I would also, the last thing I will say, encourage educators to think about different ways that students can be successful as well. Some of the most entrepreneurial young people that I get to work with didn't finish school because the traditional ways that we assess, that we define success weren't suited to their strengths. So I would encourage open-mindedness in that aspect as well.
Thank you. Char, the floor is yours.
So like Thenu said, it's very much about allowing students to learn their way and making sure you're accommodating for all the different students. So I think the main thing is respect. That's the key thing here. Every ounce of respect you give to your students, they will give back to you. And when they respect you, they will be more likely to listen to you. And that's what we want, right? We want students listening to educators so that the students go on and they learn and then they become great citizens. And the second thing is, like I said earlier, open-mindedness. I think we need to prize open-mindedness over, say, arithmetic skills or the ability to write an essay, because we have AI that can do that stuff now. But we don't have, we can't artificially create a sense of community. We can't artificially create a sense of belonging with people. We can't force everyone to just get along. So the key role of educators, I think, in this current modern world is to build soft skills in their students, to teach their students to be awesome people and to be open-minded and respectful and pretty much all of your IB attributes.
Very good. Ayla.
Yeah, I think those were both two great answers from these two right beside me. And all I can say is that there's two main things I heard growing up. And one was always to try and stand in somebody else's shoes. So I think remember who your audience is. You were once a student yourself, and what were things that you found extremely frustrating? Because it's very likely that the students that you are teaching are also finding those things still extremely frustrating. And so to acknowledge your position, but also acknowledge their position, right? They are the learner, they are the one that is going to carry our next generation. And so that's the second thing as well, is that we always look at our young people and we remind them that they are our leaders of tomorrow. If they are our leaders of tomorrow, how can we include them better in our education and our curriculum. These things are not for us in this room. They may guide us in helping to teach them, but they are our learners, and it is for them and their benefit, right? So always thinking about who our audience is and coming back to that often. That's all I can say.
You have given me so much hope. The name Festival of Hope has come true here with you. Thank you so much. I would like to ask you all to join me once more to give a big hand for these three great teachers.